If you've ever felt trapped in dream-killing cycles like procrastination, inconsistency, perfectionism, self-doubt, or just repeatedly getting in your own way, what I'm about to share with you will completely change how you think about these patterns. I've spent the past 14 years studying and observing self-sabotage in myself, and the past 7.5 years studying and observing self-sabotage in my clients. And out of everything I've learned in that period of time, there's one discovery that stands out above all the others. And this one discovery is the foundation underneath every breakthrough I've ever helped a client create and every self-sabotage pattern I've ever successfully unraveled in my own life. And once you understand this one thing, self-sabotaging behaviors that used to seem irrational suddenly start making sense, and once they make sense, you can actually resolve them and let them go. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the most important insight I've learned over the past 14 years around why people get in their own way, so that you can use this insight to let go of these unwanted patterns for good. And that insight is that there is no such thing as true self-sabotage. And anytime you seem to be sabotaging yourself, there's always a benevolent, self-interested reason behind why you're engaging in those patterns. And that's true regardless of the self-sabotage pattern you're engaged in, whether it be procrastination or standing in your own way or playing it small or not taking opportunities or avoiding doing the things on your schedule that actually matter, or you know exactly what to do but you're not doing it. All of these come from some deeper, benevolent, self-interested reason, a reason that you are unconsciously employing to try to serve or protect yourself in some way. And that's true regardless of how negatively these patterns are impacting you. Maybe it's the case that this is costing you a lot of opportunities. Maybe it's totally feeling like, oh gosh, I'm never going to be able to actually express my full potential this way. Even those things that are the most painful and that hold you back the very most are part of you trying to protect yourself or serve yourself in some way by sabotaging you in that way. And so because of that, it's not really true self-sabotage, it's part of you trying to serve you in a way that goes against your conscious goals. And once you validate and compassionately understand the part of yourself that's sabotaging you, and you understand what the benevolent self-interested reason is, that's when you can actually work on those issues at the root cause and actually be effective in solving them and letting go of that pattern. But the issue is that most people don't understand this, and instead they diagnose these kinds of issues as just laziness or a motivation or discipline issue, or they diagnose it as, oh, I'm just sabotaging myself and trying to mess myself over. And the reason why this is an issue is because if you're misdiagnosing those patterns, you're not actually going to be able to provide the accurate cure to actually resolve those patterns, and you're going to stay stuck in that cycle over and over again. But if instead you can really see what the root cause of those patterns are, and you can draw it down to the benevolent self-interested motive, and you go, oh wow, I'm trying to protect myself this way, or I'm trying to serve myself that way, at that point the cure becomes very, very obvious. And that's why this is the most important insight that I've come across in the past 14 years. Now I'm going to give you a personal example and a couple of client examples to show you how this principle works, and then afterward I'm going to share with you a simple question that you can ask yourself to immediately start to understand what the benevolent self-interested motive is underneath the reason why you're self-sabotaging. So I'm going to start with my personal example. So as a teenager, I was really messy, and my stepmom would always get on to me about cleaning up after myself or staying tidy or keeping my room clean. And for some reason, it just I valued cleaning things and I liked for things to be tidy, but I just couldn't seem to set the habit. And every single time that I tried to set that habit, I would rebel from it. I would self-sabotage. I remember a few times where there'd be little scraps of paper, and I'm thinking I should clean those up, but there would just be a part of me that would just resist and just wouldn't let me do it. But at that time I was almost tuned out from mess. I could be in a very messy room and not notice it, or just be very unconscious and just kind of leave things around without noticing that I'm leaving things around. And this tendency was often misdiagnosed by me and also by my stepmom and other people. So I would often just think, oh gosh, I'm so lazy. And then other people would also mirror that to me. It's oh Emerald, why you gotta be so lazy and leave things around? And they would also think that I'm just a careless person and that I don't care about cleanliness and tidiness. But neither of those things were true. I knew that I cared about other things. I cared a lot about my grades, and I cared a lot about my friendships, and I put a lot of effort into my work. And I knew that I just really value cleanliness and tidiness. I like to be in a clean space. But for me, I just thought, oh, I'm just so lazy. I'm just not doing this. Shame on me for being so lazy. lazy. But I didn't know at the time that that was a misdiagnosis. And it wasn't until years later when I actually discovered the real underlying benevolent self-interested motive behind why I was avoiding setting those cleanliness and tidiness habits. So the surface level, symptom level perception is, oh, this is just laziness or carelessness about tidiness. But underneath that, there was a deeper root cause, a deeper, let's say, self-interested motive behind why I was preventing myself from developing tidiness habits. And it was because I had a protection strategy that was active at the time where I would disassociate my awareness from the physical environment. And so that would be disassociating from my body and also disassociating from the space around me. And this is why I could be in a totally messy room without being consciously bothered by it. And I could, let's say, leave a mess behind without even being aware that I'd left a mess behind because I wasn't even present in the room. And the reason why I was disassociating is because I had a lot of unprocessed, really difficult feelings in my body that I just wasn't facing at the time. So I spent my entire life living up here, and had I set that tidiness habit, what that would cause me to do is to bring my awareness down into the body and into the room, and having to constantly scan for, okay, did I clean this up? Did I tidy this up? And that was something that I wasn't ready to do because I was not ready to face with those very difficult, uncomfortable feelings. So in that case, the benevolent self-interested motive that I was sabotaging those tidiness and cleanliness goals is because I was trying to protect myself from, let's say, experiencing those really, really intense, difficult to feel emotions. And so I was protecting myself by disassociating, and that disassociating stopped me from developing those habits. And so in those moments when I would just notice that there's like a piece of paper right there and I could just in 2 seconds clean it up and put it in the trash, there was a huge resistance there because that would be the start of actually becoming more embodied. And it wasn't until years later in my mid-20s when I actually processed through all of those uncomfortable feelings, or let's say most of those uncomfortable feelings, that I started to feel more comfortable being embodied and less in my head and more present in the environment. And once I was actually able to be more present, then it became very easy to set tidiness habits. And now it's on autopilot. Like I automatically scan around, I look for things to toss away or to move to other rooms, and it's super easy. But back then it was like pulling teeth for me, and I had no idea why. And just I would misdiagnose it as laziness. Everybody else would misdiagnose it as laziness too. And had I actually understood that I'm not being lazy or self-sabotaging, but there's actually benevolent, self-interested reason why I'm doing that, I could have gotten to that root cause sooner and actually resolved that pattern a lot sooner and developed those tidiness habits a lot sooner. Now, if all of this is resonating with you so far, I highly recommend checking out my free webinar, 3 Shadow Work Secrets to Get Out of Your Own Way and Reach Your Full Potential Without Having to Fight Yourself, and the link is down below in the description box. Also, if you would like to work with me in order to resolve the underlying roots of your self-sabotaging behavior, there's also a link down below in the description box that leads to an application. And now I'm going to also share with you some client examples where they were also sabotaging themselves in order to serve themselves in a particular way. And once they became aware of how they were trying to serve themselves, that's when they were able to make the breakthrough. So several years ago, I was working with a client and she wanted to shift from working her day job to making her side hustle her main thing. And at that point in time, she was really, really close to being able to make enough money with her side hustle to actually quit her 9-to-5. And the reason why she sought out my services is because she found herself sabotaging, stopping herself from actually hitting that number. Kind of as soon as she would get close to the number she would need to hit to make that transition, she would hit the brakes, she would self-sabotage. And she would stand in her own way with her goals of growing her business. And when we did an exploration to figure out the benevolent self-interested motive behind her self-sabotage, it was actually the fact that if she were to leave her 9-to-5, she really wanted to be more independent. She wanted to be a solopreneur, and she sort of conceptualized of herself as a bit of a loner, and like she didn't really like to be around a lot of other people, but her job was forcing her to be around a lot of people. And deeper down, there was a part of herself that really needed connection. And so the part of her that was sabotaging her is the part of her that needs connection and wants to keep her in the job, to keep her connected to her coworkers, because she wasn't actually doing the legwork to build relationships outside of work. And so from the perspective of the part of her that needs connection, if she were to be successful and she were to actually actually transition into making her side hustle her full-time job, then what's going to happen is that she's not going to have those social outlets that she currently has working a 9 to 5. And so that part of her was slamming on the brakes to protect her from isolation and from having a weaker support system. And once she was able to work through her blocks to connection and building a strong support system, and she did the legwork to build that strong support system, that gave her the foundation to continue to grow her business and to be able to make that transition. Now, this next one is a pattern that I've seen with several entrepreneurial clients that I've had over the years. And so I'll give one example. And so I had one client coming to me, and they were in this cycle of self-sabotage where they would basically max out their productivity and basically work 16-hour days. And they would do that for a week, and then they would crash for a month, and then they wouldn't do anything. And then they would do the same thing. They would push themselves to the brink, and then they would crash for a longer period of time. And there was this idea of going monk mode and just fully locking in and just going max productivity. And so when we looked at the benevolent self-interested motive underneath that, it's basically the body saying, whoa, 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 this is too much. This is over our boundaries. And that can happen when the conscious mind, the executive function, tries to over control the rest of the self, like the body, like the unconscious mind. And it becomes this extreme, having to control yourself to max out all of your motivation. And so those extreme resistances and acts of self-rebellion were his self trying to protect himself from the overly high expectations of his conscious mind that he was placing in on top of the body to get him to be more moderate and to be more attuned to his own natural rhythms. And once he was able to shift his mindset about those things, he was able to have a more steady, ongoing working pace where he was able to get a lot done without those crashes. Another example of this is with a woman that I've worked with, and she is very interested in writing, but in order for her to write, she was having to actually join other groups where there was kind of a due date where she would have to have the writing done by, because she couldn't just decide to write just because she wanted to. She had to do it from a sense of obligation. And so what would happen is if she was just by herself at home and she wanted to write, she really wasn't able to let herself do that. She kept self-sabotaging and she kept holding herself back. And when we looked at what the benevolent self-interested intention was behind why she was holding herself back, we found that there was a judgment there that if she were to just do something for herself, that she would be selfish. And so she had to operate extrinsically, where it's okay, what do other people expect of me now? So that she could do things without feeling selfish. And so in that way, she could write for other people, but if she were to write just because that's what she enjoys, there would be that little voice internally that say, oh, you're being selfish. And so the benevolent self-interested intention behind her self-sabotage is to keep her good and not selfish, so that she doesn't feel a sense of shame. And this enabled us to work on that issue to where she could develop a sense that she really matters and that she's not selfish for doing the things that she wants to do, and to be able to affirm her own sovereign wants and to strengthen that want to muscle. So what you'll notice is that in all of these examples, you have the surface level problem, you have the surface level self-sabotage, you have the deeper self-interested motive underneath that. And when you actually address it from the deeper self-interested motive, then the solutions become easy. It becomes very, very intuitive to be able to unwire them. So with my example, it was about keeping myself disassociated so that I don't have to face those uncomfortable feelings. And so what's the solution? Process through those uncomfortable feelings. With the first client example, it was sabotaging her business goals because she wasn't incorporating her needs for connection. And so what does she need to do? She needs to incorporate her needs for connection. With the second client example, it was because the expectations he was holding himself to weren't realistic and unattuned to his body. And so what did he have to do? He had to make his expectations more realistic and attuned to his body. And with the third client example, the underlying benevolent self-interested motive behind why she was stopping herself from writing is to prevent herself from being selfish. So what she needed to do is to work through the belief that doing things for herself is selfish. And this is so much more effective than the way that we usually misdiagnose these problems. We're usually like, oh, I'm so lazy. Oh, I need need to be more disciplined, blah, 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 blah. But what we're doing there is we're fighting with symptoms instead of actually looking at the root cause. And once you know the benevolent, self-interested motive behind why you're self-sabotaging, you know the root cause. And that's why this is literally the most important insight that you can learn out of anything when it comes to letting go of procrastination and self-sabotage. And if you really understand the benevolent, self-interested motive underneath all of those self-sabotaging patterns, you can resolve them and you can let them go. So if you notice yourself standing in your own way and self-sabotaging, here's a simple question that you can ask yourself to take yourself from the symptom directly to the roots, down to the benevolent, self-interested motive. And that question is, how am I trying to protect or serve myself by standing in my own way? And if you rule out all of the surface level things like, oh, I'm just so lazy, or it's a motivation issue, or I'm just trying to mess myself over because I'm just a mean self-sabotager, once you get rid of all of those, the solutions usually become quite clear. And if you would like to learn more about how to resolve your self-sabotage at the deepest roots, I highly recommend checking out this video right here.